signs of God's love. But they also serve as a motive for us doing likewise for our neighbors. We are to love as we have been loved, and we are to heal as we have been healed, and that is without price. But even apart from the promptings of faith, providing affordable and accessible health care to all is not really an option, but rather a requirement of our basic human decency and our integrity as human beings. We esteem first responders, do we not? Because they give expression to what it means to be human at the deepest level of what it means to be human. They rescue the other, almost always a stranger to them, and they do this very often at the cost of their own lives. As providing access to affordable health care is a requirement of human decency and integrity, it is also a requirement of human solidarity. We are the keepers of our brothers and sisters. Our first family is the human family, not the tribe. Compassionate solidarity is the only way to actualize our individual personhood. We grow to full stature and become ourselves only in compassionate communion and community that knows no borders. Healthcare is first and foremost, I believe, an act of love. Love, that demonstration of the best that is in us. But we have progressively allowed healthcare to be turned into a profit-making business venture, where service to all is increasingly truncated in the interest of greater financial gain for the few, and for the bottom feeders who would live off the suffering and the pain of others, aka insurance companies. The rhetoric of the right speaks to enlightened self-interest, another name for narcissism. It's every man for himself narrative is one of self-made people who pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. Its model for healthcare is no different than the model for the economy. But we know that trickle-down economics is bogus. How can you pull yourself up from your bootstraps if you have no boots? If you weren't given $1 million when you turned 21, so that you could buy your first pair of boots and every pair of boots you needed thereafter to have straps to pull yourself up with. Trickle-down exists to serve the rich at the expense of a poor and perennially exploited and expanding underclass. Trickle-down health is no less bogus and guarantees that the medically underserved will remain so and always increase in number. And so we need a new system. A system that recognizes that the truth that healthcare is not affordable. As a matter of fact, the expression affordable healthcare is an oxymoron. Secondly, a system that does not understand affordable and accessible health care as an expression of charity, which may be given or withheld depending on the whim or the personal preferences of those who hold power. Thirdly, a system that might even move into second place for consideration. Those things that flow from human decency, integrity, compassion, and solidarity. In other words, a system that gives primacy to affordable and accessible health care as being an essential protection of human life and a fundamental human right. We need a new system, but we don't need to reinvent the wheel. The New York Health Care Act, as far as I understand, and as it has been presented so eloquently this evening, would extend Medicare to all. It's a good system. If government exists to safeguard the life and secure the rights of people, then a just government must provide access to affordable health care to every man, woman, and child. There can be no exceptions, and there are no acceptable excuses. If government does not deliver on its responsibility, on this basic responsibility to protect life and to secure rights, then it has lost any claim to legitimacy. Unless we are without conscience, we must be appalled and offended by the gross dereliction of responsibility and the affront to justice represented in 40 million people not having access to affordable health care in the wealthiest nation in the world, a nation that some would have the hubris to label the greatest nation in the world. But the best in us knows that true greatness is always measured by how we treat the least and the most vulnerable among us. That is the only real measure of greatness. We have no problem expanding a military budget in the name of protecting our life and our rights against some real but most often contrived enemies. But we resist providing sufficient funds, public funds, to protect life in the face of the real threats represented in illness and disease, and to ensure the just delivery of quality medical care to all without distinction. If the federal government will not rise to its responsibilities, then New York State certainly can. And by doing so, the state can serve as a sign to others of what is indeed possible. Access to health care should not depend upon where a person works, how much a family earns, where a person lives, or their immigration status. Instead, every person, created as we are in the image and after the likeness of God, because they possess the dignity of personhood, has a right to life and to those things that are necessary to sustain life, including affordable, quality health care. That's the bottom line. The bottom line. Jesus once told a parable of a good Samaritan who went out of his way, stepped out of his tribe, and at personal expense attended to the wounds of a stranger. Except for emergency room visits for which they must pay out of pocket, our undocumented neighbors have no access at all to affordable health care. A few years back, one of my then undocumented parishioners, while in his 40s, was in need of a quadruple bypass. Martyr, a devoted and loving husband and father of 3 U.S.-born children. The doctors told Martyr that his time was running out, that he should prepare for the end. The doctors, the increasing frequency of visits to the hospital emergency room had already tapped out the family's meager resources. And Martyr, like most of us, could never come up with the money required for bypass surgery. So how would you have played this one out? Would you let him die? His wife made a widow, and his 3 children left as orphans or fatherless. Or would you use public funds to save his life? What if he were your husband or your father? And as you consider your power over what might be his options, never forget that he is your brother. Thank you.